Okay, welcome to this long-term plan briefing, Wednesday, 8th of November. Just to look after some points here. Apology for Matt Schneier, who's on a transport course down in Hamilton. And we have online Mike Howard and Mark Vincent, hopefully. I can't see Mark up there yet, but I guess he'll be coming in. Anyway, that's what's happening there. Okay, so the first presenter today is Brendan Gray, NRC, who will present on the tsunami sirens. Thank you, Brendan.
Morena koutou. Mihi nui kia koutou. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you all for allowing me to come and talk to you today about tsunami sirens. Got sort of two phases that I'm going to talk through today. One is the existing project that's underway at the moment. We'll get there. And the other one is about the potential future of the project. Cool. So Northland councils, all four Northland councils are part of the emergency management group throughout Northland, and Northland Regional Council, as I guess the house where I live, is running the project to replace the existing tsunami sirens throughout Northland. We've had 200 odd sirens throughout Northland since the early 2000s, and they are coming into life. They no longer meet requirements, and so this program was initiated back in 2019. What you can see here on the left-hand side of the slide, or right-hand side, if you're facing it, is the structure within the Northland Management Emergency Management Group, which Kaikoura, Far North and Whangarei districts all make up part of that group, along with the Regional Council. And we have a governance layer that also includes the National Emergency Management Group. And they are ultimately in charge of the current project. As I mentioned, the current sirens no longer meet the requirement. There was a new requirement that came out after these initial sirens were put into place. And we do not meet those standards with the existing sirens. And because of this, we have to find new sirens that meet the standard. That project is underway at the moment. We have the sirens, or half of them. But they're very, very different to the sirens. And because of that, they do need their own locations. Previous sirens were able to just be housed on standard power poles and were ultimately managed by power companies. These new sirens don't fit that. They're too big. They have too many other components to them. So we have to put them on new poles. Those new poles require new locations. So it's a significant project to get this underway. But the aim is to make sure that we cover the existing at-risk communities with the existing project. What you can see on the left hand of the slide is the existing sirens. They're very small in comparison. On the right hand side, you see the larger of the two new style of sirens. The black bit at the top of the pole, that bit alone is my height. So that goes on an 8-metre pole. As you can see, it's got two solar. They can be activated by cell phone and cellular, whereas the old sirens were only activated by the Ripple network, the power network. So a really good example of them not meeting the standard is during Cyclone Gabriel, we could not have used our tsunami siren network, whereas these ones don't require power network. Cell phone network is down, we can still activate them. We still do, even though they poll back to us, we still do need to do the 6-monthly testing that we do. That is a requirement. However, that testing is going to be considerably shorter than what it is now, because really all that testing becomes about is making sure the community knows what it is and why we need it. As opposed to right now, we do that to figure out if the sirens are even working. And that's, right now, it's the only way we figure out they're working is during those tests, whereas these ones, they poll continually. There are a lot of green ticks on there for the new sirens, and as you can see at the bottom, red X. These are nowhere near as discreet as the old sirens. In fact, most people throughout Northland wouldn't have any idea where the old sirens are. They just know they hear them. The new sirens, people will know where they are. They're very, very obvious, considerably larger. But otherwise, as you can see through the list there, a lot more benefit to them. Most of these are the requirements. So backup power source is a technical requirement. We didn't have that before. Activated without power, again, activated over multiple networks, whereas they couldn't be before. Remote monitoring, and could have been used during Cyclone Gabriel. As I said, the old ones could not, whereas these ones would be. In fact, they can go for 30 days without power. So Cyclone Gabriel was about 2 weeks that we had no power in various locations. These can go considerably longer and still be activated. To give you an idea of the size, so there are two different types. The one on the left, the diagram, sorry, these aren't ideal diagrams. We don't actually have any of these physically in pies, otherwise I'd love to bring you a photo of them, but we don't have that. But the ones on the left are the smaller units. They're used in the smaller communities, and the size is basically about sound coverage. The larger area it needs to cover, obviously, the larger siren you put in. Gets to a point where you put in multiple sirens to cover certain areas and so forth. The ones on the right, as I mentioned, they're the bigger ones. That top part, which is the dashed box, again, that's my height from the bottom to the top, and then on an 8 metre pole, roughly a 2.8 metre base, depending on the size. It's the bigger base of the two. Earthworks, we're trying to avoid digging down at depth. These things are not poured in place. These things we make the concrete base, whangarei, and get out, so that we don't have to do as much digging on site. We're trying to avoid going down below a depth of 500 millimetres. There are a few places where we've been requested to do that because they wanted to sort of flush with it. We can do that, we just want to try and avoid it for archaeological purposes, I suppose. And we do know security will be a fun project for me later on in life. Criteria for selecting sites. So obviously our resident population was a big focus here, but also the summer population. We know that Northland has a big boom over summer, and we have factored that in. The topography, so we've got to look at how the sound moves around, so the propagation and the topography go hand in hand. Availability of public land, we have tried to avoid private land just about at all costs. We don't want to get into a situation where we have to argue with the current landowner and then argue again with the next landowner in order to put this thing in. These things are aimed at lasting 20 years. So we don't want, you know, a property can change hand multiple times throughout that. We don't want that argument. So we've got land as the first thing. They are council-owned. These assets that we're putting in within Kaipara, they are part of Kaipara's assets. So obviously Kaipara's asset being on Kaipara's land is first choice, and then following that we go through the likes of public trusts, marae, iwi, that sort of thing. But we try to avoid Joe Bloggs owning his own or her own siren. We don't want that. Obviously access to power, although these things do have solar power nozzles and batteries in them. Power is a good way of keeping that battery topped up. Telecommunications. So primarily we look at places that have good cell phone coverage, but these things do also have satellite activation. So it's not a necessity. And in fact, some of the places in the far north, we know there is terrible cell phone coverage. We know that the EMAs, so the mobile phone alerts, don't work for them. So places like that, these things are literally lifesavers. And then serviceability, we have to be able to get a truck in there to drop the big block in. We have to get a truck in there that can put an 8 metre pole in, and of course lift people up to service it. So those are the considerations around the locations that we put them. As far as what Kaipara has now, I apologise, that's pretty small on the screen, but there's only really 2 locations covered there. As you can see, Mangawhai is going to get 4 of the new sirens, which will cover that area, and then there's Raupo and Ruawai, which get 2 sirens. Those are the areas that are currently covered by the tsunami siren. So with the only change being Raupo Wharf that currently doesn't have one, but we know that there's subdivided land there. So we've added that one in. As you can see there, right now, KDC has provided 200,000 for the current project. That does not cover the costs of this project. This project's been funded, as I say, from all three councils, plus funded by NRC and plus funded by NEMA. And we know that prices have changed, prices have gone up, so we know that the costs of this project are likely going to exceed the budget. We're trying to avoid that. And part of the reason that I'm here today is to get some money set aside just in case that does happen. Some of the costs that have also incurred, there's been some cellular technology changes when there's the 3G network was common then, everybody knew it, everybody relied on it. That is about to be reduced, shall we say. 2G is about to be cut off. And that meant that some of the components that we bought for this, which were 2G only, had to be replaced before they even got here. So literally while they were on the ship on the way here, we've replaced the hardware with 4G capable cell phone technology. There was no provision for spare units. All of the sirens that were purchased were to be put in a location, which means if any of them come over here and fail out of the box, we will not be able to put it into that location. And there's a big lead time on those. So rather than risking failures out of the box, we've tried to rationalise as much as we can. And with the additional funding request, we're going to try and get some spares sent over so that we've got them sitting in New Zealand. We don't want to have that order out of Denmark, which is where these come from. And we're looking at adding lighting in particular around harbours. The lighting is very beneficial. As far as community engagement goes for the current project, as I said, we're working with all of the councils. These are some 3D models that were put out at different libraries and eyesights.
Hi, sorry, is Bailey's Beach not on there? And
Correct. Bailey's Beach is not on there, and we'll get to that in a minute. I've got a little slide that's about expanding. So, yeah, but you're right. There's a few notable omissions that I want to talk through. As I was saying, these are out already. I didn't bring any of the models here because they're all already out in libraries, and I don't have any left. I do have the brochures here, but we're trying to get the word out about the current project so everybody's aware of it. And to answer your question, so during the community engagement that I've had, there's been 4 sites already that have been raised throughout Kaipara where people have said, hey, how come we don't have one? Unfortunately, the answer is because you don't have one now, but it definitely highlights a need to expand this. There is a lot of community demand to get these out there. And these are the 4 areas that specifically have had someone that has addressed it to me. So this isn't a wider community engagement piece that's raised this. This is literally people who have walked up to me and said, hey, how come we haven't got one? And these are the 4 communities that were raised in that process. I suspect once the noise gets out, no pun intended, about these, that more communities like Rotu Peninsula will come out and wonder why they don't have one as well. That's sort of outside my remit of this project, but I want to get that ball rolling. That's fine here. So these 4, Doug will obviously to talk through Bailey's Beach and Blinks. They're ones that we have very active community groups and civil defence with them, and so that's how they raised that. And so that's gone into the considerations for an expansion project. To give you an idea of the costs, there's the cost for these. These are not cheap to put in. They're big units. They have a high cost in terms of the construction. So each siren that we put in, depending on the model, costs either $56,000 or $63,000. That's at current project pricing. Those prices were locked in 2019. We know prices have gone up since then. CPI and inflation has gone up 4.4 to 6.7%. As you can see, the average price increase of this kit has been 62% over that time. So any prices, any figures that I've got up there, just you have to keep in mind, they have exploded since then. My recommendation, so we have 2 parts that we need to focus on. One is making sure this project, the current project, is successful. So that's about recovering the costs for the extra cell phone equipment that wasn't considered, and getting those spares. And then the second part is to look at Project Next, which is expanding into those 4 new areas. So for Kaipara, the amount that I'm asking to be put aside or to be considered is 322,000. Again, further consultation will no doubt raise other areas that say, hey, how come we don't have one of these? We need to keep that in mind, and also that project really isn't financially viable to do in isolation. I would not recommend that Kaipara do this on their own. All 3 councils should.
Councillor Paniero?
Yeah, so, when you talked about it being outside of your remit, the other areas identified, so, how did you arrive at where you are now with the project and like what sort of consultation? Because, yeah, there's other clearly identified areas that are lacking, but then there's a justification that Mangawhai gets for when Dargaville doesn't even have one, Bailey's Beach doesn't even have one.
So the current project was looking at replacing what was already there. So it was literally mapping out the areas where there are existing tsunami sirens now and replacing them with the new versions. That's all it was focused on. So it wasn't focused on expanding into new areas, it was just focused on replacement. So it in itself didn't have the funds to put sirens into all these new areas. So
But
Mangawhai
it's
right
brand
now,
new sirens, eh? You're putting brand new sirens in.
Yeah.
It's not exactly an upgrade, is it?
it's a complete
Brand new
replacement.
replacement.
Correct.
So you would think that there would be a review of the entire district and then where it's justified, where they're justified as an overall assessment as opposed to just what they used to be here, so we're going to put them back here in these areas when there's other areas that may be more justified.
Yep, potentially that could have been done. I wasn't part of those discussions, so I can't say, but
We're part of a discussion today that is requiring us to give more money to a decision that's potentially already been made before. So you're asking us to back your project that we've had no input into where you've decided to put them. And then you're saying that someone else already decided to put them there previously, so it's just an upgrade, but it's not. Yeah.
yeah, I certainly welcome feedback and people saying this is where we should be putting them. I can't change this project. And as I say, with this, these are communities that have raised that they need it. So, that's why I'm here, to try and get the money to get it into those communities. I can't move where the existing ones are going, unfortunately. I don't know how much consultation was done at that level back in 2019. I can't say that. I know certainly the decisions are made. We've got an executive group that sits on the civil defence layer, which includes the CEs, includes some council at the time, and strategic leadership when CEs aren't available. They made that decision. I don't know how deep.
So can I ask you, you've still got sirens in Dargaville, but they're not new ones, right? And they need replacing?
There are no.
Oh, no, okay.
There are also indoor sirens. You may be thinking of those. Those are separate to this. They're a different activation process. And they will continue. They don't change.
So you're in.
Sorry, just to carry on from that, sirens in Dargaville, I'm curious about that because every time there has been a tsunami warning and you've gone and looked at the maps, and Dargaville doesn't actually seem to be at risk. So is there actually a need for a tsunami siren in Dargaville? Is it just because I don't know how tsunamis work and whether they travel up rivers?
Yeah. So I'll preface this with I'm not a tsunami expert, but I have had a few conversations with GNS who claim to be tsunami experts. Right now, our inundation maps that we have for tsunami stop partway up the river, literally on a flat line that goes across the river. I'm pretty sure a tsunami is not going to read our maps.
That's true.
And hit that. We are getting new inundation maps done right now. So that's been done by a consultant and they're due this year. We suspect that it's going to change quite a bit as far as all of those And I don't see how Dargaville can be immune
Right.
to this sort of
Okay,
threat.
Councillor Manderson?
thank you.
Thank you, Your Honour. Can I ask, has a council got any exposure to liability in respect of tsunamis?
I can't answer that one. I can find out, definitely. I don't know if there's any direct risk there. I would assume that they're not directly liable if they don't notify, because there's no law that necessarily demands that we have tsunami warnings. So different regions, for example, have opted not to have any. Auckland's a good example. They've recently started pulling out in some of their regions. They've got a lot of reasons for that, and the media doesn't do it quite justice. They rely on the mobile alert. They have considerably better cell phone coverage than we have, so they can do that. We can't. So, well, I can't say how if the liability extends there.
Councillor Howard, followed by Councillor Manderson again.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just going back to an earlier piece in a slide, you said that our ADC contribution was 200,000 of 427,000. I'm struggling to understand how that that figure of our contribution of $200,000 comes around, given this is a shared thing amongst other councils. The other observation that I'm sorry to say comes through is that this would seem to be something of potentially inadequate planning. I have no idea how many from the presentation, how many other options were looked at, given that this was deemed in the end to have to be a replacement strategy. So did we take, do we have a number of options to consider? And given the number of locations that we've already identified or that have already been identified as needing to have this facility, actually should NRC start this process again and review the whole thing? Because it seems to me that whilst you're saying 322,000, that's just potentially just the tip of the iceberg, because if we've got at least 4 other locations, there's an exponential cost increase going to happen for us.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and start from the beginning on that one, I guess. So the 200,000, yes, that was the contribution that KDC or Kaipara, sorry, made to the project. The district councils, I guess, made a contribution that they felt they could afford at the time. It didn't directly relate to the number of sirens that are being put in. Likewise, Northland Regional Council contributed 2.5 million, I think. They don't get any sirens ultimately. None of them end up as their asset. So Kaipara at the time, this again going back to 2019, put forward the 200,000. The value of the sirens that they're getting is 427,000 installed. So that's how that relates. As far as poor planning goes, yeah, there were definitely some mistakes that were made. I don't know about poor planning, just there were some things that weren't factored in. I can't say that I was part of that decision. I can't say how that decision was made. There may have been decisions that were deliberately made at the time to exclude things in order to keep the costs down. I can't answer that one. As far as future goes and this opening up and being bigger than Ben-Hur, yeah, there is potential for that to happen. I don't want that to stop forward momentum, I guess. If we worried about this blowing out and saying that, you know, it's going to cost a lot of money in the future, yes, it will, definitely. And when we get other sirens in there will be other areas. But we can't afford to, or I don't think anybody can afford to put sirens into every area at this point in time. And this really is just a starting point to get the ball rolling. And again, as it says on the slide that's up there now, all 3 councils really need to be on board at the same point in time to make this financially viable. We don't want to have small shipments coming from Denmark because we do a little bit at a time. That would just be cost prohibitive.
Well,
Okay, look, I'm going to take one more question from Mark Vincent. seeing he hasn't had the opportunity yet, and then we'll finish this presentation because we're well over time.
Yep, sorry.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. No, I just was wondering if maybe the reason why the existing alert sirens are where they are is because it was based on an assessment of the risk. And I wonder if when looking at other possible sites where there's been requested, at least will it be possible that an assessment of risk will be part of that process as well in determining where they should go? Because, well, we only have so many dollars to go around, and I suspect that the current ones are where they are because of an assessment of risk. I just was wanting some direction on that. Didn't say.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back, I guess, a few slides there, we're definitely basing this around population. Of course, where the more population is, the more risk is. And there are existing tsunami inundation models done on a older technology that identify those areas.
Actually, could I just hold you up there? So you're saying that because if there's more people gathered in one place, that increases the risk of tsunami. I thought it was more to do
No, that increases the risk to people.
I mean, the consequences rather than probability.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Because it's at least two factors in risk management. One is the likelihood, and the other is the consequences. So you're saying you're basing it on consequences, never mind how unlikely something might happen.
Yeah, well, likelihood is a really hard bar to judge on. You know, we don't know when the next tsunami is. And likewise, any tsunamis in the past don't correlate to when the next tsunami is going to hit. So all we can do is risk to the public. So yes, the consequence would be what we focus on there, and that's based around population, not just resident population, but holiday population. Largely Northland lives on the coast. So obviously the coast is factored in there. And the models that have been done, they come up with different levels which identify that risk level as well. And they are based around that too. And the old sirens were done that way as well. And the new sirens continue with that. Yeah.
Okay, if you could complete your presentation, Brendan, and then I'll have CE Maris wrap that up.
Sure. So the good thing is, thank you, Your Worship. The good thing is we're pretty much at the end anyway. So these community plans, as part of this project, we will update all of our community plans so they get all new tsunami processes that go along with it and new information that goes out there. As it says there, we've got 45 climbing very rapidly. These sirens are just one tool in the toolkit. They are not the be all and end all. The EMAs, the mobile alerts, are getting more and more popular and more frequent, unfortunately. Sirens go along with all the other tools that we've got out there. They are just really beneficial for those isolated communities that don't get all the other tools. Further information, as always, on the NRC's website, just look up tsunami and there's tons of information there if anybody wants it. And that is it from me. So, thank you. If anybody needs, they can get in contact with me elsewhere.
Yep.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could just sort of wrap this up as far as direction goes. So currently, when we talk about the figures this afternoon, this project and the funding is not included in that at the moment. So what I'm going to ask you to do is think about your direction to give to us after lunch in that session about whether or not you want to include it, noting that there's two specific aspects to this. One, completing the current project, and that's 69K, versus the additional 4 locations for new siren at 322K. So that's what we're going to seek this afternoon, to just put your thinking hats on in that space. I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we'll move on. Item 2, Tracy Dean to present this in person, LTP update. Thank you, Tracy.
Good morning. Today we're finalising activities, costings and edging towards preparation of consultation documents. Still sitting between those two dates just there. Today, roading and footpaths returns and economic development will be looked at. That's as part of the district leadership section. The Revenue and Financing Policy will return and you'll get another round of updates from our community team. This should help prioritise your first cut of costings in the public excluded later on today. First of all, I just wanted to highlight the importance of property valuations. I know this sounds a little left field, what I was just saying, but Sue and Christine had brought the timelines for the Kaipara revaluations to an earlier briefing. And in January, Quotable Value will come to a briefing to outline the revaluations and answer your questions. You are the people the community will come to, so they're going to ask, the community is going to ask you questions. So this January briefing helps you. It's been set up for you so that you can help your community. So this is the timeline and it's still on track for that. And the meeting that you'll be having is somewhere around about the 24th of January where they'll come and explain. Quotable Value will come and explain to you. But I thought I'd take a moment to explain why, I know these look complicated. I was trying to work out how to simplify general rates to make sense, because this is the community thinks that rates will go up if their property value goes up, and that's not always the case. But I'll try and explain. If it doesn't work, it's okay, but we'll give it a try. I've used our scales from the last briefing, and you'll see that the general rate pot has been pulled out to talk about. So it's just the general rates. So see the green general rates box. How much each property pays towards the box depends on the value of their property. So simplified a lot, this means if we add all the total of all the property in the district and it comes to $100 and my property is worth $2, my property is 2 parts of the whole 100, which is 2%, and I'll pay 2% of the general rates portion of the inbox. It's calculated on my percentage share of all properties in the district. Therefore, regardless of whether elected members have a smaller you make the pots on the right, whether my rates go up. So how much you decide to spend and the costings this afternoon is make my rates go up and down. A general rate is calculated according to the use of the property. Let's just switch to another slide. So we have 2 different types of rate for that. So the property type, so one or the other of the property types can be given more or less of that out pot, depending on how much benefit you think they get from the activity on the right. See my little 2% still sitting in the bottom of the residential one. Assume the out pot on the right stays the same. If every property valuation goes up or down by the same percentage, everybody's share of the out pot stays the same and their rates would stay the same. Using the example before, let's say after valuation, all the properties go up by 50% in value. The total of all property in the district now adds up to 150. My value went up from $2 to $3. $3 of 150 is still 2% of the total, so I'm still only paying 2% share. Therefore, my rates would stay the same, even though my property is valued higher than it was last time. All right. Often property valuations go up or down by different amounts for different reasons. This means the share of the general rate for each property often changes by different percentages. So that's more normal. We're not likely to all go up or down the same amount, right? So using the example below, let's say after valuation changes in property values across the district vary from going down by 5% right through to increasing by 10%. We've seen that sort of thing happen in the past. My property value went down from $2 to $1.80. So my $1.80 of the $100 is now 1.8% of the total. My 2% share of the general rate has reduced to 1.8, and therefore my general rate would go down. So why is this important? Because it matters to the community. So January is when QV will come to explain any changes across Kaipara and to give you more informed answers if the community asks you a question. All right. So I'll now pass you over to economic development topic, which sits inside, oh, you've got obviously these two, the returning district leadership, finance and internal services. Michael's going to come and talk to you about economic development.
So before we do, while Michael was coming over, just through you, you're fine, please, thank you. So just what we're doing is we've got a placeholder in your diary. So normally we like to not have scheduled anything post the last council meeting in December, which I think is about the 13th, something like that, prior to the first briefing in February. Now, given the timings that Tracy's just outlined you with QV and what they're going to do, this is always an issue for our councillors and members in that if you don't know what the story is with the QV in advance, when the community comes to you, you can't talk to it, okay? So given the timing now, unfortunately, we've scheduled it's a 1 hour, 2 hour session. It won't be 2 hours on the 24th of January. Learn from QV, who will present the outputs and what's happening with the valuations in the Kaipara district. Keep that.
Would online be an option?
Yes, online is definitely an option.
Councillor Matheson?
Be in the district.
Oh, Councillor Bamford?
Yeah.
No. Right over. No, I think questions are forbidden about what you've just spoken about those calculations, aren't they? It's a lot.
I probably wouldn't be able to answer them. I just simplified rates, say that I understand them, but there's a whole lot more, of course, that
Yeah, I'm just
Sue's team would have to ask.
taking it, so all properties could rise, but if some properties in one area rise more than the others, then although there's been a rise in your rates, you could actually have a reduction in them.
Correct. It's all about your
You're sorted, eh?
total pie. That's what would happen.
So thank you. What we'll do is I have a placeholder in my diary, so you don't have yet, but it is for the 24th of January from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock. It probably won't take 2 hours. We'll send the invites out. Alana will do that in the next day or two, but please just be aware of it. I think online is the way to do it so that people don't have to cause too many issues with your holiday and break. Thank you. Michael Day.
Thanks, team, and everything. Look, let's just get through this quickly. Promoting economic development and growth is a key focus of this council. We are a shareholder of Northland Inc., the Regional Economic Development Agency, but we're not here specifically to talk about them today. It's what we are doing as a council. We have created an economic development committee this term to drive economic development in the district. The intention is to create an economic development strategy specifically for Kaipara. We are currently recruiting for an economic development lead officer to help make us forward. And what you see up on the screen here is a starter for 10 of some of the projects which may fall out of the economic development strategy. And really keen to get elected members' views on any other specific matters that they want to focus this work on. So this is at a high level here.
I think, Erin Wilson-Collins, you have to say that?
Oh, you go. You go.
Oh, I just think that's ongoing, so it's a good thing to give thought to, because sometimes you come up with a great idea, but you don't have it right now, so. Anybody that can contribute to ideas to drive economic growth of the district, that's great. Thank you.
Possibly the chair of the Economic Development Committee might have an idea when he comes back in the room.
You had to slip out for a phone call.
Through Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question? Is there an appetite to set aside some possible funding in this space? So, I mean, we're not sure, I mean, obviously, so we're getting the economic development strategy sort of underway at the moment. What could come of that is an implementation action plan, and I know there will be a cost to a standalone website, obviously, to promote Kaipara as a place to be. So that will cost funds.
Councillor Erin Wilson.
Thank you. So the questions that I have are around who would be responsible for those activities that you've got up there, because like you say, we're a shareholder of Northland Inc. They're already doing, or should be, understand their remit is to do things like promoting tourism and economic development. We also have, for example, in the Dargaville area, the DCDB who have campaigns and things that they already run as well. So I'm just wondering, when you say about budget, I'm needing to understand more of what
So if I can,
the,
Mr Mayor, so Northland Inc, the current funding goes through the Investment Growth Reserve, which gets divvied out to projects that are across the region, including Kaipara District. For that, we work, it's a kind of a wheel. So we work with Northland Link quite closely, and we leverage off their relationship with us quite strongly at the moment, which is great. We also work with the DCDB. They have no funding a lot of the time. They're constantly requesting funding, and we don't have any funding to provide either in that space. So it's about trying to get together with the DCDB, Northland Inc, and business as well is important in this wheel too, to work on what we can do. And currently we have no funding. The one final point, sorry, Councillor Wilson-Collins, is that the economic development lead is kind of the centre of the spoke, and that role will be around working with all of these groups to get what we need.
right, so it's not about duplicating what,
No, not at all.
yeah,
No,
it's about trying to find funding
implementing.
to help what's already
Yep.
happening in the community. Yeah, okay.
Councillor Larson?
Thank you. Yeah, my comment would be that I always envisaged that we would promote Kaipara specifically with our Kaipara Economic Development Initiative, and that we would be going to Auckland and internationally and saying, Kaipara, the place to be, come here, here's our point of difference. You know, the affordable living, the ability to cyber commute from a affordable place, and the ease of coming here and setting up businesses and expanding businesses, all those points that we've sort of been pushing. And so I can't imagine how we would promote ourselves without having an online presence in the modern world. So my feedback would be, if we're going to have any economic development strategy for our district at all, we must have an online, a really good, polished online presence. That would be my point. And so we do need to put some funding towards making it work well. It needn't be a huge amount, but
Okay, the other thing that I would add to that is, having been involved in quite a few meetings with Northland Inc, and we've also got out there the Northland Chamber of Commerce, that pulling together a lot of what's already out there is an important part of this, because, for example, if you just take golf in New Zealand, the potential to wrap up all the golf courses in the district, because Bailey Beach is a damn good course too, you know, and if we need more accommodation in Dargaville, and hopefully if we get the development we're hoping to get here with housing and further business opportunities, that sort of thing will come into play, and we can lift just in one area like that, you know, if you could get another 1,000 golfers travelling through the district to play golf, because it's a game that's just taken off. I didn't realise until I looked at the numbers how big golf's grown particularly since COVID. So there's opportunities in all sorts of directions, and there's already a lot of groups out there that we can tap, you know, to help drive this. And that doesn't necessarily cost this council a lot of money. It's about being aggressive about making those, you know, those contacts. And for example, we looked at, we've got capability with, you know, our welcoming communities programs, and we thought, well, maybe within our council we could expand that so that that role can go and look at welcoming people before they get here, not just when they get here, with tourist promotion, with business opportunities in the district, etc. So it's a pretty exciting thing to drive. If we can drive it well, I think it should be a fruit for the district. Yeah. Councillor Paniora.
Thank you. I wonder if, because we don't know how much to put towards the budget unless we have a look at the strategy once it's complete, the manager comes on board. Maybe once we have that happening, then we'll have a more informed view on the type of budget and the quantum required.
For the chair, I'd suggest an initial quantum could be something like 50,000 per year.
Yeah, totally agree. You there, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Howard, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I have, thanks. Just on this, did Mr. Day put up a slide of some of the elements that are already underway on economic development? Because I can't see anything. You referenced that.
Through the chair, yes, Councillor Howard, on the moment, it talks about what the current focus is, and it's on preparing the economic development strategy, including implementation and action plans, a standalone website to promote Kaipara as the place to be, ! And then various marketing campains.
Okay, yep, okay.
Tourism.
Thanks, mate. Got that. We can finish at that. No, thank you. I wasn't sure whether there was a separate slide. I had that slide up. Look, for me, the first question is that I want to make sure that we do have or will have allocation, obviously, for an economic development lead in the LTP. That's a must, and I tend to concur that. I think that by starting off with a $50,000 base, I think is quite crucial. And in fact, you know, there's all sorts of things that we as a council need to provide in terms of base services and the likes. But when we look at economic development, this is the big go forward strategy that we have, and we have to be committed. We have to be solid about this, and actually excited about the opportunities that this could bring. And I don't think that we don't want to be avant-garde about it, but we don't want to be conservative about our approach to this. I think that we've got to be really, really strong and enthusiastic.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Aaron's comments.
Thank you. Just to add my thoughts, because I feel like that's what we're doing. When I first came on council, economic development, tourism especially, was something that the public was asking us to support and be more involved in. So that's really awesome. But just comments made around the table, I think we also need to be mindful of, like has been mentioned, we have a severe accommodation crisis at the moment, and I can happy to speak to him about that later, where we just don't have anything available for people to actually move to town at the moment, in the Dargaville area at least. So, and I'm not sure that Mangawhai is considered an affordable place to live either. So I'm just worried about cart before the horse as such. So, so I just, yeah, if we're going to promote an economic development strategy, and if we're going to start implementing anything, it's kind of like our infrastructure. We need to make sure that we've got other things in place so that the economic development strategy is actually a success. We're not asking people to move into our district when we don't have the infrastructure or the housing or the, you know, and things like that, because at the moment we don't severely. And the other thing that I wanted to verbalise is I've always taken the stance of if you make an area a really awesome place for the people that already live there, the other people will come. So so again, just making sure that our focus doesn't completely shift to visitors, tourists, newcomers, and that we're actually making sure we still focus on the people that already live here, because they will promote their own district if they love living here. So that's just something I wanted to get out. Thank you for listening to my TED talk.
Okay, move on.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, what I'm hearing is there's a need here as well. Notwithstanding your comments there, Councillor Wilson-Collins, I think there's, as far as duration goes, a sum of about $50,000 per year, $150,000 over 3 years. So it's quite a small bickies, but especially on the online presence that we can allocated in the LTP for the next 3 years. That's kind of what I heard from the conversation. So we'll take that.
Sorry, can I also add, the arts and culture strategy would probably tie in really nicely with this work as well. And it might be a case of being able to save costs by putting it all together.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Michael. So we've got item 3, is it?
That's fine.
Right.
Rogan.
Oh, okay, we've done item 4. Okay, the next is item 4, roading and footpaths. Dawn Spence from NTA. Anna, just to present this person, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. If you don't mind, I'll maybe give a little explanation. Our previous asset manager has moved on to other pastures, although he's still technically in the room. So I am backfilling his role. My expertise, I'm a chartered professional civil engineer, 38 years international experience building bridges, roads, drainage across the world. So the last 4 years in Northland, helping Cairns. So I'm currently backfilling the role, and if I have all the correct answers, I do have a great paths or the transportation sections. We first of all apologise that the paper sent out was the incorrect version, and the new version has just been delivered to you. Yep. So if I say take it as read, I apologise, you won't have read the correct figures, so I apologise for that, but we will run through the corrected figures as we go through this presentation. Basically, we have a timeline to date. So we had to put a draft subsidy funding bid for a continuous maintenance submission into Waka Kotahi so that we can be moderated and appraised. That first continuous bid went in at the 1st of September, and the draft subsidy funding bid for improvement programmes went in on the 29th of September. And those are the programmes that we're talking to today. We have started a moderation process with Waka Kotahi, and we've managed to drop the continuous maintenance bid down to 115 from 145. And the figures in your revised papers are those $115 million bid, not the 145. We still have the process of improvement programme to be moderated. The continuous bid has to be revised by the 8th of December for submission back to Waka Kotahi, and the improvement programme has to be moderated and discussed through your LTP process for March submission for subsidy funding. Right, so to give you a bit of the basics, we have based our funding on going back to basics. We know we have a eroding challenge ahead, and a lot of the storms, the damages, the COVID impacted how we're doing our works. So we are looking at going back to basics with our roading to optimise our drainage and renewals, to shape our unsealed roads and use a proper wearing course over the top to protect that structural strength, and to optimise sealed roads and rehabilitations, because we want the best value and the least maintenance costs going forward. In the funding bid, the funding uplifts, significant ones, and these was a slide that was presented at the last presentation done by Andy, and it's been moderated. So the main ones were the drainage, the unsealed roads, the sealed roads, as well as the structures, which are a critical component of our network. As bridges, when they tend to fail, they're quite catastrophic. So we need to address bridges that need to be renewed or replaced. To give you a little insight as well as why we do what we do, this is a typical asset condition curve. Now, I'm not expecting everyone to understand it, but the simple principle is if you think of the curve as the drop in level of serviceability that you're getting from your asset over time. So $1 spent on preventative maintenance would cost you $2 on predictive renewal maintenance. And by the time it collapses, that reactive maintenance and rehabilitation is about $5. So value for money is do the preventative and the renewals in a timely fashion, and you have less reactive to fix that goes wrong. That is our maintenance concept. Then moving on to our improvements capital programme. This was also put out in detail. A very big list was given to you the last time. So this is the 3-year submission programme that we pulled together, and this is what and I think there's a couple of particular details that we'll run through on questions. For example, in this continuous list here, we have, I remember what it's actually, but it's CAIPRA level of service improvements. So the 4 main roads for year 1 have been listed in the paper. Kames, Lawrence, I'm forgetting that, I apologize, but they are listed in the paper. Lawrence, Devich, Kames and Judd's Road. So we have put in an estimated budget for doing those works to a reasonable level of service, not just sealing the roads. And just for an example, to construct a sealed road, we're currently estimating around 700k per kilometre. Now that's just sealing the road. That's not improving the drainage, adding footpaths, building the level of service up. You could be in the region of 2 million per kilometre if you wanted to do all those extras as well. From a maintenance perspective, that's about 35,000 per annum for general maintenance on a sealed road, and then another 70,000 per annum for every reseal that has to be done. Oops, I've gone a little bit too far. Please, trying to scroll down my notes. My apologies, my notes are coming up clearly. Against an unsealed road, if we build the unsealed road to best practice, which is what was previously called Centre of Excellence, but that is to reshape the road to the correct width, cross-section profile, build the strength up in the pavement layers and put a wearing course. Now it's not a sealed wearing course, but it is a designed wearing course on it. Add the drainage to the side of the road. We're estimating about $45,000 per kilometre to redo those works. And then we need about another $20,000 every 10 years to rehabilitate that, and minimal costs for maintenance. So it's the balance of what is the right way to go forward. And I think that brings me to our last point. I'm open to questions and any other details. Struggling with the mouse.
So Lambeth.
Just quickly on those figures, like 700k per kilometre for sealing, basically, and 45. Do we get the subsidy as well on top of that, or is that including the subsidy?
That is the total cost. As to whether you would get subsidy for a seal extension.
You don't.
It is an option under Waka Kotahi, but there's certain criteria that has to be met. A business case and a value exercise. I can say honestly, we've had one traction seal extension approved by Waka Kotahi in the far north, but we've got none in Whangarei and no other ones that we applied for. So the risk of getting subsidy is quite low based on history across Northland. It's not the priority of the GPS.
Councillor Williams.
Through the chair. I've sent him some questions via email. I don't know if you'd received them.
I have done, and I think I have. The first one would be the question about the public transport services and the public transport infrastructure. We've included 4 lines in our low cost, low risk bid. And that is to look at doing a business case and a trial bus service between Mangawhai Heads and through Dargaville. And then for the infrastructure portion is to do the end of trip facilities. So that's a bus shelter, bus marking, signage, etc. So that is the tentative amounts that we've started as a trial.
Oh, that's awesome. And I just had another question on the walking and cycling connection.
That is correct. So there is external funding available for projects. Our first bid is through the National Land Transport Fund, because that's we try and get our funding for it. But there are other options to explore if we don't receive funding through that. MB has a New Zealand Cycle Trails Fund. Sometimes you can get a PGF fund. It depends what the new government decides to put out as a funding criteria. There are alternatives, and we're always looking for ways to raise funds if there's a local share available. But our first bid is into the National Land Transport Fund that we've put in through this. And the other question you asked,
Questions?
Yes, please.
Thank you, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got to say, just for reference, I'm having a lot of problem hearing a lot of what's being said. The audio feed seems to be dropping out quite regularly, so I'm not picking up on everything. However, I did pick up that there was talk about specific reference to Kames, Lawrence, Devitts, and I think Judd's roads being worked on. I missed out on the conversation. So where, under which section did that roadwork activity come under in that schedule?
we are looking at improving the level of service. So it's a capital improvement programme.
Yeah, capital improvement, yep.
Yep, under the sheet, they're listed as capital improvement programme, major projects, which are over 2 million. And it's the level of service upgrade programme, Kaipara Road Sealing Programme, which for 3 years we've put in as 39 million.
Okay.
Initial 13.
Yep.
With the concept that there would be a 10-year sealing programme continuing after that.
Okay, no, that's cool. Thank you. I can see that now.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah, just through you, Mr. Mayor, we will be having another conversation in the PEC section when Sue presents her paper. So all of these capital improvements do have an influence on Sue's paper. So I have a bit more of a wider debate when we present that paper.
Thank you.
Shall we have a break for refreshments?
If you want to take a 5-minute break or 10-minute break.
Yeah, let's take a break for lunch. And 40. Thank you.
Those online, we're just breaking back at just after 10:40.
Okay, tap.
Well, it's just me today, but Christine is in the background. And this is, I've redone the policy from the last time when we discussed quite a number of changes and also what we were actually getting in revenue as opposed to what our assumption had been. So the changes, so this report actually looks at the changes to the policy as a result of our past meetings, and there's a couple of things that we've still got to finalise. Okay, and I think Councillor Howard can hear me, can you? Councillor Howard? Okay.
Are you there, Michael?
Okay, he must be away from his
The cup of tea.
we've put everything on. Okay, thank you. So the changes from the last meeting are the, and it's not an, as I say, a revenue and finance policy is not an exact science. You put in there that you're going to collect 75% from resource consents. You might actually only collect 65%. So you wouldn't normally change things unless you were certain there was a trend and you accepted the trend and you understood the reasons for it. And we went through the rationale at the last meeting for some of the changes. So what I've done since the last meeting, I've removed the reference of Three Waters as per the current legislation. I've added the Mangawhai Museum, the rate of $20 and the rationale for that per ratepayer. And it's going to be in the same area as the Mangawhai Harbour Restoration Rating area. We've noted that there will be a waste targeted rate to be used for bins when introduced, and I believe that's from the 1st of July 2026, so that for now, waste is treated as a general rate and user pays because people pay for the bags and the balance of solid waste activity is paid by general rates. But in the future, the collection of the bins that are proposed, and that's going, they're doing the waste minimisation at the moment. So bins will be targeted rate, that's for recycling and for rubbish collection, but any other costs would be generally rated. So that's allowing for the new waste targeted rate in 1st of July 26. The pensioner housing and economic development had been added as sub-activities and their funding inserted because it seemed to have been omitted. Cemeteries, we did note at the time we were only receiving 60% fees for cemeteries, but we haven't reduced the percentage, and obviously people will have to take that, and our staff will have to take that into account, the expected rate when they do the fees and charges next time. So I'm not proposing to change that at this time. For parks, we noted that 100% was coming from the general rates, as council is not the predominant owner of sports fields. So there's very little money that we actually get in from, so we've put it up to 100% that's general rated. Animal control, in the past, we haven't, we've been pretty lenient with animal owners and we didn't recover a lot, but we've looked at, but I think it was 2 years ago, we finally put the price, actually had a jump in pricing. And so we increased the fee recovery in the policy from 50% to 80% to reflect the increases in fees. On top of this, we've got the building control. The recovery has been 85%, and that's in the past. But in 2023, we're only getting 65%. And predominantly that was from, we're using consultants now in the mix to do our processing, to do some of our inspections. And we've also got another building compliance manager, which they don't recover as much as our inspectors or our processing people do. So there's a lower recovery anticipated. So I've changed the policy to go down from 85 to 75 and see how we go there, and made our building control manager aware of that. So he has to take that into his figures when he's looking at fees. For resource consents, we also failed to meet the 70% recovery, and that's because we're utilising so many consultants. We're so low in our staff there, so the overheads can't be recovered. So we think we'll just leave that figure currently at 70%, because even though this year's was actually 60%. At the last meeting we had, we also looked at capital value, but we discounted that at the time. And we had a consultant in who led that meeting, and the council guidance at the time that they didn't, they didn't want to look at CV at this time. What you did give me some messaging the last time we discussed this with it, was either looking at a differential or a targeted rate, because of the fact that rural people were always complaining they were paying for urban costs. So I did look at the differential, but that became really unwieldy we've currently got a differential in for our rural people of, I think it's 155%, and urban's at 100. If we were to change that, that was going to be quite difficult. So I've then looked at a proposed targeted rate. So I'll just... Right, here we go. So what I did was I tried to pick out the urban amenities that we have that are probably more used by urban than rural. And you can see the totals there that this LTP has, and also the actual costs from 23. I think 24 might be the budget this year. So you can see they're going up in the proposed LTP. And so I picked out the parks, the Dargaville pool, and the libraries. And I've looked at differentiating by charging different percentages of costs, and I've made taken an arbitrary figure of 30% be charged to the rural, and the residential properties be charged the 70%. So that would basically mean that the cost to the rural people would go down, and the residential people would bear the cost, and it would be equalised cost over the district to residential. So I did have some questions. I'll just have a look at those and then ask for feedback. So we're coming to the end of the revenue and financing. We want to basically nail this at the end of today, and we will be talking a bit more about this targeted rate in the when we're looking at the LTP costs going forward. So the questions that I've got is what libraries by area fall under other libraries? I think that's Mangatarota and Kaiwaka, that's my understanding, and Hayley will, Tahi and Paparoa. So there's 3 others in under the district's libraries. The Dargaville Library, it says the funding, it looks like the Dargaville Library is 3.36 million, other libraries 255, and the Mangawhai Library total funding about 80K. That's correct. Why does the Mangawhai Library remain static over 5 years at 16K per annum? Because that's how it works at the moment. Basically 16, there is one staff member that comes on a weekly basis to Mangawhai, Paparoa, Kaiwaka and Mangatarota libraries. But so there is some staff going there, but basically, and the books are provided, but basically it's run by volunteers. So it's just a sort of grant to that library.
Excuse me, Sue, Mike's up there wanting a question.
Okay, well, I'm just doing the questions that I've got at the moment. So I'm just doing ones, I think, from councillor.
Oh, you are too.
Sorry, okay. So I'll finish those and then Mike can ask me a question. So what we haven't done is put in the costs that were discussed at the last briefing, which was for more staff to actually work at the Mangawhai Library. So none of those costs have gone in. And obviously there's no costs of the new library for Mangawhai, because the new libraries, both proposed for Mangawhai and Dargaville, are not going to occur till 2027. So I hope that explains that. And you've said are overheads per annum spread over all the libraries in the district? Basically, they're all grouped together, and the overheads go over the group of them. So we've picked out the costs for you. Do fees and charges earned from the Dargaville Library also go towards overall funding of the library? We don't have any fees and charges now, so we don't have anything. We don't charge for the hire of, I mean, it's minimal anyway. And for late books, we don't. Okay, so I'll take questions from.
Question up there for Mike, is it? No.
Mike, did you have a question?
While we wait for Mike, we'll go to Gordon.
Yeah, thanks for the minute. Thanks, Steve. In light of what's come, sort of been highlighted with the libraries in the whole of the district, whereas there could be, well, looking at getting paid staff for Mangawhai, but the other revelation is that it acts like the mothership for all the other libraries, and they are now distributed out through the, I'm wondering if we're on the right grading system. I wonder if it should be just general for everyone or not. Yeah, I'm just sort of meeting that idea because it appears as though we've got this whole spread and yeah.
So the reason, so you're talking about the difference between rural and residential?
Yeah, but the whole service of the library service, how we've got Paparoa, we've got Ruawai, we've got, and how the staff are serving those areas and.
Oh, so that will change because as your libraries get bigger, then Mangawhai has a staff, the Mangawhai. The discussion you want to have on who's doing what in what library will come at the end of this month. My understanding is that there's going to be a paper presented to Council for decision making. This is about how we rate. And the reason, these rates would not impact on the UAGC that you decide, which is one of the last decisions you make when you do the rates. Because of the fact it's not a uniform charge over the district, it's a two uniform charge, it's two uniform charges for each activity.
Simple answer, is it?
Okay. Mark up there waiting for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question goes back to the recovery percentages for building consents and resource consents, and relates also to the libraries thing. Like there was a suggestion made at a previous meeting that the savings we're making on staff we haven't employed could be redirected to paying for another staff member for the Mangawhai Library straight off. I think that's a bit shooting from the hip sort of response myself, and I'm just wondering, would it not be more appropriate for that surplus, if you like, in the wages bill be spent on meeting the difference between the expected recovery rate for building consents and resource consents caused by having to pay more for consultants? I would say that's more of a natural fit for me. What's your thoughts on that?
We haven't got any surplus in our you're talking about the surplus wages this year? So this year's wages, I'm talking about a policy which is totally different. So this year's wages, you can have that discussion if you want something to come out of, be funded a different way, and that might be part of Hayley's paper.
Actually, yes, you're quite right. So
this is about the policy.
About the long-term plan starting 1 July next year. And as far as that goes.
Yes, this is the 1 July next year. So when we're going to have the discussion after lunch as to where we are in the long-term plan. But this is about the revenue and financing policy. And
well, yeah, I think that for libraries, it should be the same across the district without the differential between rural and urban.
Okay, good to get some direction, but yeah.
Followed by Councillor Paniwara.
Okay.
Mike.
Sorry, so we have Mike, Councillor Aaron, Councillor Pera.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I've sorted out a gremlin. Thank you. Sue, I think you've clarified a point, because I did, under the library's cost, by the way, I do tend to agree that libraries is a cost across the district, and it's a service, and I don't know that it's more used by urban versus rural people. But it was interesting, you had the figure staff, primarily Dargaville, in there at $400,000, and I just had the query as to whether that had been increased to in fact allow for somebody for the Mangawhai Library. I will say, and I think that I believe this strongly, time has come, the way that Mangawhai has grown and the figures that we were shown a week or so ago about the usage based on very limited hours and what has been, as Councillor Williams said, for 20 years, a voluntary based thing. I think that it's time that time has come for us to step up and actually provide that community with a paid resource, and I think it's part of, whether you call it, it's part of economic development, it's part of all sorts of things in the community, and it's a responsibility. So I would certainly was a bit galled to see the $16,000, which is just a grant, I think, still in there for that. But I've covered that. The other question I've got is this, and I think that the same as libraries, parks, I'm happy to see parks, across the whole area and covered, and a targeted rate, a specific rate, because it is going to become a big priority for us. However, I think that you've got a staff factor for parks that you will need across the district. So I can understand that being across a rate that is applied across the district. The area that I have a concern with, a challenge with, and is the Dargaville swimming pool, which is a specific facility resource for the Dargaville community and staffed and paid for there and specifically there. So why would that not be a targeted rate for Dargaville residents?
It could be. I'd seek direction from the council if that's what they want. But in the past, things like the Mangawhai summer bus, and I haven't got that, and that probably is something that should come in here as well, because that's sort of an urban, I just suddenly thought of that this week. But they're treated as paid for, well, they have been treated in the past as paid for by the district as part of their general rate. So if you wanted to pull something out as another separate cost, you need to tell me now.
Well, okay, so that's a discussion for us.
That's what I'm asking you now, because I'm putting a proposal to pull out parks and pools together in libraries. But if you were saying to me as a council, you want to see pools separated again, that's up to you.
Well, my point is here, and this is only my view, is that it's yes, I can understand it's part of parks recreation, but it is an absolute standalone. Now, I'm trying to think about other elements that might be done in the same way, and it's not a matter of being pedantic about, this is only for this area or anything like that. It is just that I think the pool stands out from parks and rural recreation as such, and it is a specific benefit to a specific community, whereas the staff for parks, and if we pull it all together for parks, that will be a district-wide resource, so understandably paid for across the district. So, I'd be happy to look at that, but I don't know what other implications there are for other costs.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Erin.
Thank you. Just to carry on from Councillor Howard's comments there about the Dargaville pool, I think it can be. I think there is actually a debate there that the Dargaville pool is a district-wide asset, and it's actually a northern-wide asset because it's the only 50-metre pool available, and there are swim meets where people travel from far distances several times a year, and so we could debate that till we're blue in the face. But what I actually want to talk about was I was actually one of the people that requested this work be done. But I was actually thinking more things like footpaths and street lighting and things like that. I think it's really difficult to justify these particular costs as being used more or less by urban or rural people. Libraries, like we say, we've got our district libraries, we've got they're not branch libraries, you know, we've got sub-libraries throughout the area that people can access. They don't necessarily have to come to Dargaville to access that. Parks and pools can be used, yeah, I mean, they can be used by urban people. There probably is a justification that they are used slightly more by urban people. I'm not comfortable with a 70-30% split on these particular items. Maybe a 60-40% split.
Agree.
Was more the items that people raise with me who live rurally are specifically amenities that they don't have outside their door that urban people have, which is your footpaths, your roading and your street lighting. But I don't know how doable that even is to be able to differentiate between rural and residential.
Okay, so it was difficult because it's just basically goes into one bucket, so I couldn't pull it out. That was the issue for, they have a figure for street lighting,
yep.
Thinking maintenance, but I couldn't pull out any.
So if this is the best way to do it, I think a 60-40 split would be more appropriate, because then it's a slight differentiation. You know, then you can justify, hey, look, rural people, you know, you are getting a bit of a kickback because you can't access these amenities as often as the urban people do, but it's not such a varied, not such a huge variance. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Paniwa, followed by Councillor Larson.
Yeah, I was just going to say, similar to what Erin's just alluded to, that I am more in favour of an even split, but taking the point that it's probably, yeah, better to get a little bit more of a kickback, because if I was going to put my money on anything, it would be that rural actually uses the libraries a bit more in terms of the free Wi-Fi, because they can't, you know, just go home and use it, and little ones going down to the library after school to wait because they can't just go home afterwards to wait for their parents to go to work. So, you know, there's a bit of a give and a take there. I was also going to bring up about the coal, that's we're the Kaipara district and it's a district asset. So I wouldn't be in favour of a targeted rate for that, and quite frankly getting sick of councillors continually pointing out Dargaville assets and things only when it's to try and put more responsibility or onus on Dargaville residents, and then when bringing up things about Mangawhai, it's to try and get
Jonathan Larson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've kind of lost my train of thought because it went on so long, but I'll try it again. Raised this matter of this bus that goes to the kids' pitch. So in the context of it being Dargaville Pool, what is the cost of running that bus per annum?
I think it's about 40,000, and I think we are actually looking at trying to get some sponsorship there. You know, so that we get, but yeah, we're just pursuing that at the moment. That's much.
Okay, there's not a huge budget. And so, you know, I've been listening to this conversation around the usage of various sectors, and I think there's probably a fair amount of supposition in that, and there would be, from my perspective, well, justify a position. There must be some data. I mean, I look at the vast tracts of land in the Wairoa ward. And my supposition would be that the urban people would use a lot more than the far-flung rural people. So, and so once again, there must be some, in the library world, some data on usage. And if we could actually have something to support a position that we take, rather than just us, making assumptions, because that's all right.
So what I should do is get some information through from Lisa to see what she has on that. But reality is, rates are tax, and sometimes it is assumptions. I mean, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Trying to get better.
It can be less coarse if they're based on some actual fact. The other point I'd make is that when we look at this from a differential perspective,
So just to confirm, that is happening, because what I'm talking about is taking something from the general. At the moment, the rural people, in fact, you'll see when we get to my presentation on LTP, will actually bring up who pays what. But you'll see that the rural people are paying a lot more than possibly some of the residential. And so that if we can take these rates off the general rate and put it as a target rate, and then I think that's doing it. Yes. Okay.
Thanks very much. Okay, next I have Mark, Mike, and then Gordon.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The signal gets quite crappy from time to time, dare I say it. I lost you there for about half a minute that last time and lost you again. You're back.
We can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, this sounds quite scratchy still from your side of things. I'm sorry, Sue. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I was just wanting to comment on the piece on the libraries thing. If we want to follow things to the logical conclusion, then we would make it a user pays service, so that the only ones to pay for it are the ones that use it. There is the aspect of it being available as a service, because even those folk who are living in town aren't necessarily going to use the service if they're not inclined to. So that's my statement further in support of, as I said earlier, of having it come out of the general rate in particular. Oh, I've lost you again. Could you let me know when you can hear me?
You will, no problem.
Okay. Rightio, I know you're coming and going. Oh, there you are again. The other story relating to the Dargaville pool, I think if you were to look into the history of it, its justification for funding from several sources was that it was of regional significance, not just district significance, because I think at the time it was approved, and it might still be true, it is the only 50-metre pool in Northland. So when they want to have regional swimming championships and so on, that's the pool that disappears again. I suppose you can't hear me now? Oh, okay, right. Just the picture went completely blank. It's actually during the course of the morning, I think Mike's already commented on it too. Like your picture's not yet in focus properly. There you are, better. It drops out for up to 15 seconds normally, probably every 5 or 10 minutes. It's bloody hopeless. Sorry, it's frustrating.
Actually, we're actually hearing you loud and clear, Mark. It's,
Oh, that makes one of us.
We're hearing.
Okay. That was all I wanted to say on those things anyway. Thank you. I'll switch me.
Councillor Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and appreciate, and just thank you, Councillor Mark, for that elaboration because of the pool. Let me be very, very clear. Councillor Paniora made a comment, started to make a comment, but then it dropped out. But my point about that was simply is that there is a figure that is, give or take, 1% of our rates. And I didn't realise, so I do now, thank you, Mark, that it was considered a regional pool. And so, fine. It was a very, very objective proposition that I raised, nothing to do with Dargaville versus Mangawhai or anything like that. I think that it's interesting on Parks and Rec. Oh, by the way, I'd be quite happy with the suggestion from a couple about the 60-40 split. I think it's good that we split out the likes of library and parks recreation as targeted rates, if only to show our ratepayers exactly what they are paying for and what's involved. So it just highlights those matters. On Parks and Recreation, I have a query, and this may be for another day, that if council is to pay for all of those costs, maintenance and development, etc., what responsibility would then lie on the table for the community groups that use them or in the past or currently have governed them? So that is perhaps another question for the future.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, I won't mention the pool. I think everything's been said about that, and I think we've cleared that up. The parks, we all know that it needs some work there, and there's a lot to go. So there's some footpaths and all that in places like Dargaville. When we have a look at the businesses and the street lighting and everything else, the businesses in Dargaville, when you have a look at them, most of them are serving the rural community. There's not many, how should I put it, people that work and live in Dargaville that will go down and buy fence posts and gates and stop drench and get their tractor repaired. When you start separating out Dargaville, there is a lot of businesses there that support the rural community.
Yep.
And it's the same throughout the district. There's a lot of people who live rurally who come into work in the township, and are we saying that they should be paying less of a rate? I think we're getting into complicated territory here as far as that's concerned. Yeah, that's just my comment about the targeting urban and rural. I think they're too close to each other and interlinked and service each other that it's very dangerous to try and separate them.
Further questions? Do you want to make any comments here, see that?
Just probably it might be best so just sort of summing up the direction, just so we're all clear.
So I think I'll get more direction from the LTP, but what I've taken on board is that you think the 60-40 split is probably okay. Possibly could add footpaths and lighting, but we can discuss that later. Yeah, and that's basically what I've taken on board, but you like the fact of showing it as a separate rate. So we can discuss that percentage when we get to LTP.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Yeah, okay, item 6, cabinet. Ruby Mitchell, person, engagement and topics for consultation document.
Gillian's well.
Oh, Gillian's right, yeah, John. Yeah.
Those Three Musketeers.
I can just hold it. Yeah. Oh, hey, is it? I think it's I think that's like free treats. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Good morning. We're here today to talk about the second round of pre-engagement with the community. The community communication engagement team has carried out, as well as the draft topics and themes that were used to form the consultation document. So pre-engagement gives council staff and elected members a good understanding of the thoughts, feelings and aspirations of the community to consider when creating the 2024-2027 long-term plan. It educates the community on the LTP and how they can engage with it. And it raises the profile of elected members and gives them the opportunity to hear directly from the community about what's important to them. So back in May, you'll remember that we carried out the first round of pre-engagement. We used the I Wish, I Wonder framework to gather high-level aspirations and hear from the community on those top priorities. We presented the themes of that pre-engagement back to council in the July LTP briefing. And it's also been fed back to staff to see and refer to as they prepare the activity profiles for council's consideration and direction. For the second round of this pre-engagement, we used an interactive budgeting activity at each of the market events. So staff and elected members gave a limited amount of money, stickers, to participants. And as you can see on the slide, the areas were divided into council's 6 activity groups for this long-term plan. So they are district leadership, finance and internal services, roading and footpaths, solid waste, flood protection and land drainage, open spaces and facilities, and regulatory functions. And then as part of the stalls, we also included general info on the shortened 3-year long-term plan, a summary of feedback from the first round of pre-engagement, and we also provided a feedback jar for people. So those are some of the places we carried out the second round of pre-engagement in the top. We went right across the district, Mangawhai, Dargaville, Mongaturoto, and we also carried out this activity at a Dargaville business mix and mingle event as well. So these are the results of the interactive money activity. Across the events, we had around 240 to 250 people participate. Participants were given a $100, $200 and $300 note in paper money to spend from the Bank of Kaipara District Council. The split across the 6 activity groups was as follows. So of the overall spend, 36% went towards roading and footpaths. That was the largest chunk. Open spaces and facilities, people spent 22%, followed by flood protection and drainage at 19%, solid waste at 12%, regulatory functions 6%, and district leadership, finance and internal services on 5%. So in this slide here, you can see the results comparing the locations. So some of the info here is that participants in Mangawhai and Mongaturoto prioritised or spent more on roading and footpaths than the other events. The DCDB Dargaville business event and the Dargaville community market, they prioritised and spent more on open spaces and facilities than the other events. And DCDB Dargaville business event and Mangawhai ranked flood protection and land drainage higher than participants at the other events, or they gave it more money. Yeah. And then these ones. Sorry, that one on the right is the text has gone over the slide, but these are the results with the spend at each event with a breakdown of the note values. So for Mangawhai, at the tavern market, roading and footpaths had the most spend with 38% overall, followed by a tie with open spaces and facilities and flood protection and land drainage on 21%. At the Dargaville DCGB business event, roading and footpaths again had the highest spend, taking 30% of the investment by participants, followed by open spaces and facilities on 25% and flood protection and land drainage on 22%. At the Dargaville Community Market, roading and footpaths were given 32% of the spend, followed by open spaces and facilities with 25% of the spend. Flood protection and land drainage and solid waste were both on 17%. And at Mongaturoto, roading and footpaths took 40% of the spend. So this was probably the biggest across the events, followed by open spaces and facilities on 18% of the spend, and then solid waste with 14% of the spend. So operational staff also meet quarterly with representatives of Kaipara District Mana Whenua, and key feedback through this quarterly forum has been for Council to focus its efforts through the next LTP on climate resilience, provisioning for and responding to the effects of climate change through mitigation and adaptation. Emergency management and drought and flood resilience have also been highlighted as important focuses. We've also continued to get feedback from the market events and through ongoing engagements with the council and through the community communications and engagement team through additional engagements. We've included some of the verbatim comments here on the slide, and you'll see that there are continued themes of improved roading, rubbish and recycling services, walking and cycling facilities and parks. These 2 rounds of pre-engagement help to support the early discussions Council has for the long-term plan. So that's just about the 2 rounds of pre-engagement that we've done. The next step is the first formal step to consult and engage with our community on the long-term plan, and that's the release of our consultation document, which was planned for March 24. The purpose of that consultation document is to provide an effective basis for public participation in local authority decision-making processes relating to the content and key issues contained in the long-term plan. So as part of the legislative requirements for the shortened 3-year plan, there's a number of things that the consultation document must include. It must clearly state that the effects of the severe weather events on the affected local authorities, district or region, and it also must clearly state the resulting issues faced by the affected local authority. It also needs to include information on Three Waters reform and the impact that that has on council services. And then there's a few direction setting questions that are too significant to be managed as business as usual or under each of the activity profiles. So on the slide here, you can see some of those high level topics. After today's briefing, we will then go away and work on forming practical options with the funding or rating impact for each one laid out clearly and easily for consultation with the community. And the draft of the consultation questions along with the consultation document is planned to come back to Council in a December LTP briefing for feedback and direction from you. So there's a few more on that page there. This is just the timeline going forward from this briefing, the next briefing, when we hope to bring back the draft consultation document, and then February it will come back again to Council for further direction, and then expect to be adopted at the end of February for consultation in March. That's it from us.
The opportunities in these community consultations to drill down a little bit more into some specific, for example, with recreational facilities. Now, what do the people or community hubs for that matter, what do people in, say, the Dargaville district, the Dargaville township want that we can bring out of them in terms of specific ideas? All very well people say we want more of this, that more of this is what? You know what I mean?
So we provided we provided all of the verbatim comments that we've received up to the end of June, I think it was, in that LTP council briefing.
First one we did, yeah, we got a lot more specific than we, yeah. Councillor Williams?
The jar that we said we could put in the specific comments, is that been?
We've recorded it. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the plan is as well as to provide, I guess, at the end of the formal consultation period, when council is considering the direction and the questions at the end of that, that will re-provide all those comments that we've had through pre-engagement.
Further questions? Councillor Ellen Wilson-Collins.
I don't have a question, but I do want to make a comment that it's not surprising. The results are actually not surprising, are they? Anyone? Yeah. And the consultation and the questions that you have planned seem to cover those core issues that people have pointed out as well. So I just think that's a really good thing, and wanted to thank you guys for your work in this space and for running around the district and collecting all that information, because it is extremely valuable when it comes to our decision making. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Just to provide some feedback from when I was at the Minwai market, people absolutely love the fact that we got this money and they could, it was really good because visually, it also showed them things that council do and then what was important for them. So it was pretty good interaction from the public, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for your efforts too. I think it's well worth elected members going for these days and communicating. I get both positive and negative comments, but at least I'm my community and teasing out some of the things that that they desire in their long-term plans for our district. So I'd like to thank you for those efforts. I know that often it's your weekends and your after hours, and it's appreciated that staff go to that extra mile and help us. Thank you.
Can I just wrap this one up?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and for the work for the team as well. I'm just going to re-stress the importance of these consultation questions, actually. They're there to form the fundamental basis to the questions we ask the community out there. And you can obviously see the process that the team have got through to understand what the community are telling you and the questions we're going to ask as a result. So we're doing a lot of work in the background now, because they're not easy to write these questions. They've got to be very clear, and then we've got to have supporting information, the consultation document to back that up and give more detail too. So obviously these are going to come back to you, but there's a good summation there of the questions we're going to be asking, and I think it's really important we do that. So I just wanted to stress that.
Thank you. Okay, let's see time. We're going to school.
Might be easy to have an early lunch.
Okay. Let's have an early lunch. We're ahead of time for once. Back half an hour for lunch or so. That's that. We'll come back at 10 past 12.
Yeah, that's right.
10 past 12. Okay. Thank you.
10 past 12 back for you guys online.
There was a round of applause.